I'm talking today to Sam Neill, the New Zealand actor who's appeared in nearly 100 feature films, unbelievable number of films, not to mention all the documentaries and TV series and things he's been involved in, Jurassic Park and so on. And some of those small art house movies, which are some of my favourites, especially the New Zealand ones, The Hunt for the Wilder People, Dean Spanley, The Piano. He also makes wine in Central Otago under the Two Paddocks label. And Pinot Noir is his specialty, and he also makes great Riesling. And now he's written his memoir, and it's titled, Did I Ever Tell You This? And I'll just flash it on the screen there. And it's a great read. He's a very eloquent speaker as well as a writer. But I'll start off with a non-acting and non-wine question. And did you enjoy writing this book, Sam?
Yeah, it was an odd process, really. I'd been diagnosed with cancer, and it meant going into a heavy sort of chemotherapy regime. I was sort of confined to quarters in my flat in Sydney, and it meant that I was suddenly without any sort of purpose. I'm so used to going to work, whether it's on the farm or whether it's going to acting gigs. I sort of live for work, really, and because I enjoy both of them. And suddenly I couldn't go to work. You know, I'd lost all my hair. I was having treatment once a week, and I wasn't able to be home on the farm. So I really had nothing to do much. So I started writing stuff about my life. I had no intention to write a book. I just thought I'd write down some stories for my kids, really, and just sort of things that amused me, just to keep my brain working. Because one of the great things about acting is that it keeps your brain lively. You have to learn lines and make all sorts of decisions while you're working. Suddenly, I was without that. So I would go to bed at night thinking, what will I do tomorrow? What will I write about? And then I'd think about a few things and go, oh, well, that would amuse me. Maybe it would amuse someone else. But after about 50,000 words, I thought, I don't know, maybe there's a book in this. I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in it, but I had lunch with David Marr one day, and I said, well, how many words do you need for a book? And you're probably well aware of this, but I think it's about 100,000 is what you basically need for a book. And I'd written 50. And he said, I think that you've got a book in you. So I thought, I'll carry on and I will see where it goes with this. And then I wrote about 120,000 or something like that. And by that time, I had enough writing. So I sent it off to some publishers, and I got these immediate enthusiastic responses from a bunch of different publishers. So I thought, well, maybe someone else would be interested in this. So it ended up in a book. It didn't start as a book, and I certainly didn't write it from the beginning to the end. I was born here, and I've ended up here. It was nothing like that. It was just a sort of accidental bunch of things that made me finish up with a book.
Well, the chemo must have been some time ago. You're not doing it anymore?
I'm still doing the chemo, yeah. I do once every fortnight, but it's a sort of it's a newfangled sort of chemo. I'm a sort of lab rat, I think, of some. And it's not a conventional one, but it comes with certain advantages. One is that it's keeping me alive, which is a great thing. The disadvantage, I lose my taste and everything for about 3 days after treatment, and then all that starts, and losing your taste and appetite and everything is a very sort of dismal existence, and that's no fun at all. But after 4 or 5 days, your taste comes back, and by this time of the cycle, I'm really enjoying my wine again, and everything tastes superb. So it's a very weird up and down time.
I was going to ask you about that because there is nothing quite so terrible to a wine lover as to lose their sense of taste and smell. And of course, we all lived through COVID, fearing that it might strike us that way. And most of us survived. I think most of us who did lose our sense of taste came back. But for a few people have lost it permanently, and that would be a fate worse than death, it seems to me.
I would find that unbearable. Yeah. It's strange how much your taste is directly wired to your mental health, just how you feel about the world. If you can't taste the world seems very unappealing.
We take our sense of smell for granted, I think, and just walking down the street and smelling the various flowers and trees and plants to go through a world where you couldn't do that is unimaginable.
Very bleak. Yeah.
Yes. How has being a wine farmer enhanced your appreciation of nature? Because I'm a farmer's son. I think that when you grow up on the land or you're close to the land, you have a different view of it. You have a deeper understanding of nature's creatures of all kinds. And this is a great asset, I think, when you're trying to work out viticulture and understand wine.
Yeah, well, we've been absorbed in organics for many years now, and the more I know about that, the more we know about that, the more fascinated we are by it. And Mike is extremely interested in soil. Soil's everything, and that's the problem with conventional wine farming is that you're destroying all the good things that are in the soil. And I think I'm right in saying that 70% of all life on Earth is below the surface of the soil. And if you're covering that soil with stuff that's going to kill that, what future is there? The future is in soil health. And I love the idea that we are doing so much for our soil. Our soil is better than how we found it. We do all these things, like we grow these cover crops between the vines. I think it was 5 different types of clover, which are restoring nitrogen to the soil. We're growing, well, I can never remember the name of the plant, but it attracts these magical little native wasps, which they're beneficial insects as opposed to insects that do you an injury. And so they predate on the leaf curler moths.
And they leave your vines alone.
Yeah, they leave your vines alone. And compost is everything for us. And seaweed tea. There's no end to it, Huon. It's a wonderful organic world. What else do we do? Oh yeah, and we mash up all the pruned vines, so they're returning carbon to the soil. But more than that, I love birds. I'm obsessed by birds, and I can't stop planting trees, particularly in the riparian, the creeks and things around the farm. And we're bringing native birds back. Luckily, they've got no interest in grapes. They're not like starlings. They just sing and they're decorative.
Sure.
But I'm crazy about birds, so we do everything that we can. So with every year, my farm and the vineyards in general, I have 4 vineyards around central Otago. They become more and more beautiful, and the soil becomes richer, and the wine becomes better as a result. That's my view.
Well, organics is one thing, and obviously New Zealand is a difficult place to do, to withhold the chemicals that a lot of people use. But I guess you're in the drier part of New Zealand, much more humid parts of New Zealand where organics might be more difficult. And also, I wanted to ask you, are you interested in biodynamics at all? Are you interested in going to that step?
Yes. Well, Mike is. Not so much. But Mike loves that stuff. Not to the extent that we wait till the moon is full and all that that stuff. But those preps, those teas and so on, those infusions Mike loves all that stuff. I'm not sure if we've got any cow horns buried in the soil around the place, but we've certainly adopted quite a few of those practices. No, I think it's a lot of work, and people say, why is good Pinot Noir expensive? And a lot of that to do is it's not machine made wine. we estimate that every vine is visited by a pair of hands 12 or 13 times a year. It's a lot of manual labor.
Yes.
Dropping fruit, and it's important that rather than typically we might be 3 tons per hectare or something. It's very, very small, but I can't remember exactly what the statistics, but it would be a third of the output. You drop so much fruit, you prune it off, so the vine puts all its energy into the fruit that remains. So we'd get, from a typical vine, we'd get a third less than you would from Sauvignon Blanc or something like that.
Yeah, and nobody wants an ordinary Pinot Noir, do they? I mean, there's plenty of market for fair average quality Shiraz, which usually tastes okay, but cheap and nasty Pinot, no one wants that.
It's the best or nothing.
Yes. What is the last wine that you've drunk that's really impressed you? I won't ask you what's the best wine you've ever drunk in your life, which is a bit too predictable, but what have you had lately that's impressed you?
Well, look, I bought a bottle. I'm in Western Australia at the moment, and I should have bought a Western Australian wine, but I just happened to pass a John Duval Plexus in a wine shop I was in earlier this year, and I think he's a wonderful winemaker, and it's hard to go past him. When I come to Australia, I tend to drink Shiraz. I'm very fond of Shiraz. It's about the other end of the wine spectrum from Pinot Noir, which is my primary love when it comes to red wine. But there's something about Australian Shirazes that I just adore, and a good one like made by somebody great like John Duval.
Yes. Yeah, he's one of the best, that's for sure. And I think Dean Shaw has been your winemaker for at least 20 years.
Dean's been making my wine since, it's nearly 25. Nearly 25, yeah.
And he's not just your winemaker. He makes wine for a number of people at a sort of a custom crush facility in near Lake Dunstan, isn't it?
I'm a third partner. That's the other thing. We have Two Paddocks is my wine, and then I'm a third partner in something called the Central Tiger Wine Company, and Dean is the winemaker there. There we make wine for about 3 or 4 substantial wineries, and the odd bit of contract winemaking here and there. But no, Dean's been with me for a long, long time, so we can read each other like Braille.
And you're away a lot, of course, so a lot of it's left presumably to him to make up his mind. Does he act as a style counsel, or does he make his own way and basically do his own thing?
Look, it's a bunch of different things. I mean, he understands me very well and what I like and what I don't like. Since the beginning, Larry McKenna from Martinborough, he comes down 3 or 4 times a year as our consultant. So he gives us a sort of objective view of things. And between Dean, myself, Jackie, who runs Two Paddocks, who's in front of the office there, and Mike, who's our viticulturalist, who's been also with me for 15 years or something, we're all on the same page.
That's Mike Wing, isn't it?
Mike Wing, yeah.
It seems to me that the great wines of the world are usually produced in places where there is continuity. Like, they don't change the winemaker every 5 minutes. They have a continuity of ownership and of winemaking and of viticulture.
Yeah, so Mike and Dean understand, with every successive year, you understand every sort of square millimeter of your vineyards. And because every season has different challenges, so that the more profound your understanding of where you are and the longer you've been there, that all pays off. That continuity is awfully important.
Every season can be different, and probably is different. So, you sort of start afresh every year. And to be good at something, you need to work away and have as many vintages in the same place as possible, I think, to build that bank of experience. Yes,
and of course, weather is becoming increasingly unpredictable. This time of the year, spring, of course, comes with its own challenges, and frost is our greatest enemy.
Yes.
This is always a scary time. and it comes with a certain amount of stress too. If you're the one that's being woken up at 4 a.m. when the frost alarms go off.
I wanted to ask you something about art, because you're obviously an art collector, art lover. You have artist friends. You love the arts in general. Your working life is in film. You're an aesthete. People often talk about winemaking as a combination of art and science. We know the science bit. That's easy. You can look at that and say that's the science. You can identify it, but art is less tangible. Do you know where the art lies in wine? Can you articulate that?
Look, I would characterize it not so much art as craft, and craft is, that the lines are blurred there, aren't they? But I think craft is everything, and there's less and less craft in the world.
Yes,
as machines and AI and all that sort of thing take over. But I have a grandson who is learning a trade, but it's and trades are everything. But his trade is cabinet making. That's proper craft, and I love that. There's something that's made by hand, and effectively our wines are made by hand.
Yes. Well, cabinet making, you've got to use a saw and a chisel and a hammer and make those joints and make them fit. It's a wonderful craft. I know you have some strong views on natural wine too, so-called natural wine, or I prefer to use the words low intervention wine or hands-off wine, or Brian Crozer has this wonderful expression, accidental wine, which I thought might appeal to your sense of humour. You make a no sulphur wine. I know you make a no sulphur Pinot, but I'm sure it's good quality Pinot.
Look, I mean, it's the word natural that gives me the shits. And that virtue signaling, that's, I don't know what the statistics are, but there's nothing natural about most natural wines. That some blokes bought some juice from someone who knows where it's been grown or how it's been growing, but you can almost guarantee it's not organic. Then by what is normally actually bad winemaking, because we've learned over thousands of years how to clarify wine with a tiny bit of egg yolk will clarify a massive amount of wine. And so what you end up with a sort of sludgy looking thing that you can't see through, which has a shelf life of a matter of weeks. This is not good. And then to call it natural, we've learned over thousands of years how to make wine well, and how to make wine that will age, and then go, oh, no, we don't want to sit in any of that. Seems to me very foolish. It's not that I haven't given it a go. I mean, a few years ago, I was in Paris. I was out in the town with a bunch of wine writers or something, and someone who's connected to the natural world said, I know a great wine bar. They have all the best natural wines made in France. Let's go there. So I said, yeah, I'm a man with an open mind. And they had 2 or 3 somms there, and the one was looking after us. We said, we want to taste the best natural wines from France. There wasn't one glass of wine there that I enjoyed, not one. And I couldn't wait to go out and eat somewhere and drink some well-made wine. Having said that, we were interested in perhaps trying to make a no-ads wine ourselves, but not from some random grapes that someone else has grown. We selected. One of my vineyards is called the Fusilier, the part of the vineyard where generally has the best grapes, and we'll make the single vineyard off the Fusilier. We took the same grapes and did an A/B test. So we made a no-ads wine and a well-made wine, the Fusilier.
No ads being additives, of course. Sorry to interrupt there.
So we made 2 very different wines from the same grapes. And it was actually, Dean made a very, very good wine. It's not something that you would put down and for 10 years and open it again. It like all those no-ad wines, you must drink it pretty quickly because it's not going to age. But it was a very interesting wine and totally different from the Fuselier. As a result, we make a small amount every year, just 120 cases, something like that. And we just sell it to our club members if they want it. And there's one or two restaurants who are interested in it. So that's as much as we do. And I enjoy drinking it, but I don't, having said that, I don't really approve of it, because I think a great wine should be made in a great way, and it should be even greater after you've put it down for 20 years.
Yeah. I suspect a lot of these, nearly all younger people who are doing this, a lot of them actually grow up a bit after a few years and start making really good wine, which is the positive side of it all. It just reminds me of when we were kids, we listened to the music our parents loved and thought and rejected it. They look at the wine their parents drink and reject that. That's just part of the natural cycle, isn't it?
Okay. Well, they'll come around.
Fair enough. If you were starting again, you would go back to Central Otago to plant a vineyard?
Yes, it's the place that I love more than anywhere in the world. And it's the place that, we used to go on holidays to when I was a child. My father taught me to fish there, and it's incredibly beautiful, and it's the most happy accident. I've had a lot of happy accidents in my life, and I think one of the happiest is that it turns out that it's one of the very, very few areas in the world where you can grow great Pinot Noir. So that's extremely serendipitous.
And Pinot is a bit choosy where it puts its roots, isn't it?
Yeah, there's very few places where you can grow it well. Very, very few places in the world. And I not so long ago went to Oregon to the International Pinot thing that they have there every 2 years, I think. And that brings it into even sharper focus. There's all the best people turn up there eventually. It's, I mean, you can grow Cab Sav in so many places, Shiraz even more, but Pinot is very fussy, very fussy.
Yeah.
And that's where I live, and that's where Pinot loves living too.
And you grew up not far from there anyway, didn't you? In Dunedin.
Yeah. It's just down the road in Dunedin. That's why we used to go to Central for our holidays. I skied there, and one of the great blessings of my career, such as it's meant I've been able to afford to build a house there and have a farm, and I'm sort of itching to get back among my sheep and so on. Oh, that's another thing that you as an ex-farmer would understand. I love having sheep around, and they're really part of the wine process too, and my cattle. The manure, and the sheep are really useful. They do all the mowing in the winter around the vines, and they're fertilizing the place at the same time. Thanks to our sheep. Great thanks.
What could be more natural than that?
Yeah.
What about Burgundy? Do you have any particular love of Burgundy and visiting the place? Are you one of those people that needs to visit the source and go to the source and say, well, how the hell do they make such great booze?
I've only been there once, and oddly enough, it was at this time of the year the last Rugby World Cup in France was in 2007, I think it was.
I don't know, Sam. I don't do rugby. I do Aussie rules.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, it's a big weekend coming up. So it was a sort of devastating World Cup because the All Blacks and the Wallabies were knocked out in the semis. Now, George Gregan is an old friend of mine, the then captain of the Wallabies. And George and his wife and my wife and I, we said, what are we going to do? Let's go to Burgundy. And we went down, we had 4 or 5 days in Burgundy. We went to Champagne first, I think. We went to Chablis. We were in the Chablis region, and then into Burgundy proper. And that's the only time I've been to Burgundy. And I wanted to stand on some of the hallowed grounds and all that. And we had some very memorable dinners, none of which I particularly enjoyed. The food was so heavy there, which took me by surprise. I thought, because the great thing about Burgundies is, and a French bloke once told me, they said, well, there's no reason you shouldn't drink red wine with fish. Well, I suppose he's French. He knows what he's talking about. And he owned a restaurant, and I think that's the thing about Pinot Noir. It is light and expressive, and it doesn't need a big steak or something. You can eat fish and drink Pinot Noir. So I was quite surprised at how heavy the food was there, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. But I loved being in Burgundy and going to places that I only knew of by a map or a wine label. It was pretty amazing. But I've never been back, and I'm down here. I'm near the Margaret River region, and I love some wines that come out of there. And people said, "Go and have a wine experience down there." But actually, I find tasting wine at other people's wineries really boring. I'd sooner go surfing or something. I'm really interested in my own winery. I'm not particularly. I wish them well, but I don't want to stand around in a tasting room for 2 hours. And I don't really drink with food. I'm not one of those people that stands around a table and drinks all day. I don't enjoy that.
Well, I'd imagine that you hang out with a lot of famous actors occasionally. You'd be sitting around a fancy restaurant table in a great restaurant. Do they always hand you the wine list?
Yes, they tend to do that. Although I don't go to a lot of fancy restaurants. I don't particularly like fancy eating. I can't. I like good food, but I don't like fancy. And there's two saints involved in my favorite restaurants. If I have to, if you're forcing me to pick my favorite restaurants, you weren't, but I'll do it anyway. So there's St. John in London, which is
yeah, I just went there this year.
Yeah, it's called nose to tail eating, and it's like they just have plain paper on and a knife and fork, and they've got a very good wine list, only French sadly, but and the food is very plain, straight up, and unpretentious, and I feel so comfortable there. And then there's St. Peter in Sydney, which is all about fish. And again, it's about eating the whole fish rather than just the fillet.
I hate it when you go to a restaurant and you order fish and it comes out as some coated baton that doesn't resemble any part of the fish. And you think, well, I like my food to look like what it is, you know?
Yeah. But again, it's really, really wonderful food. But sort of the idea of no wastage, I think, is wonderful when it comes to it.
Yes. Yeah. Brian Brown is a great mate of yours, an Aussie actor who's well known over here. What does he think of your wine caper? He strikes me as a bit of more of a beer drinker, maybe a bit of an Aussie larrikin who might think that wine is just for wankers.
Look, Brian has no taste at all. And I mean that in the broadest sense and actually in the most specific. He has no taste for wine. I sometimes bring him a bottle, because he's too miserable to buy it himself. But it's wasted on him. He eats at a colossal pace. I said, why do you eat so fast? Why don't you enjoy your food? He said, no, just fuel. It's fuel, mate. Fuel. And he tosses it down as quick as he can. And yeah, he's more of a beer drinker. Wine is wasted on him, and certainly Two Paddocks is far, far too good for him.
I hope he's not watching. Talking about wine and actors, I don't think there are an awful lot of actors who make wine, but Gerard Depardieu comes to mind. Have you met him? And if so, did you find you had much in common?
Gerard is such fun, and what do we have in common? He's a character, let's say, and we did one terrible film together. You don't need to know what it is, and we had no scenes together. That's as close as we've come in a professional sense. He's also very valuable to know if you're in Paris, if you need a restaurant booking, because everybody, in spite of his eccentricities, everybody adores Depardieu. And I was staying on the Place des Vosges. There's a very smart restaurant there. It's been there forever, and you need to book 3 years in advance to get a seat there. And my son-in-law, my daughter and my son-in-law were coming over for the weekend to see me, and I needed a reservation, and I thought I'd love to go to that place. I know. I called Depardieu and see if he can get us in, and it's a fancy restaurant, I have to tell you that. And Gerard said, "Yeah, but a problem," and someone called me back in about 10 minutes and said, "We have a table for you." But this restaurant is one of these places where the waiters and everyone think they're better than you are. That gives me the absolute shits. Anyway, the maitre d'. I'd already taken them out for a big lunch, so I wasn't very hungry, and there were all these escargot and everything. Everything was heavy there. Everything was unendurably heavy. So I thought for a first course, I just like a salad or something, and there was no salads on this very heavy French menu. So I said, "Do you think the chef could possibly just make me a salad, something simple?" And the maitre d' said, "No." I said, "Really? He didn't. No, it's not on the menu. You cannot order." I said, "No, just as a favor to me, just a simple salad. I'm sure he's got some lettuce and tomato and a vinaigrette. Could you do that?" "No." I said, "That's absolutely fantastic, that you couldn't get a friggin' salad in a good restaurant."
Probably had a few trois étoiles or deux étoiles, I think. A few stars on it, did it? It's a fancy place.
I think it did. They were just so, they were doing you such a favor by serving you. I just can't bear that.
I can't let you go without telling. We got to get this story about James Mason in somewhere, which is a beauty. You, I think, had not been drinking much great wine up until that point, if I remember the story correctly. And you hadn't even met James Mason, but you got a phone call from him.
Yes, I was working in Australia at that point, but I had a film called My Brilliant Career, which was out and about. And James was married to a marvelous Australian woman called Clarissa Kay. And they'd seen this film, My Brilliant Career. And I don't know, there's something about, they thought, I don't know what inspired them to do this, but James had the same agent as I did in Australia. And I think they told each other that kid's interesting or something, and he should have a career outside of Australia or something like that. And I got a call on a sound stage in Melbourne, and you never got phone calls at work in those days. It was before cell phones. Yeah. And I said, "Who's calling me?" And the third AD said, "It's someone called James Mason." I thought, I wonder how many James Masons there are in the world. So I answered the phone, and this very familiar voice said, I went to the voice. He said, "Hello, this is James Mason. You don't know me, but my wife and I think you're really rather good, and we'd like to send you an air ticket. Come to stay with us in Switzerland, and I will find you an agent in England, and you should be working abroad." So, I mean, it was extremely flattering and lovely, and I went to stay with them. They're most delightful people, and we'd spend the day cross country skiing and so on, and eat, those melty cheesy things. What do they call them?
Oh yes, fondue.
Fondue at night. And one night we were at an old auberge, which I think dated back to the 1400s. This is sort of somewhere near Lausanne, and very, very old place with very traditional food. And James selected a bottle of wine, and I don't know exactly what it was, but I'd never tasted anything like it. And I said to James, "This this is a most wonderful wine, James. What is it? And he said, my boy, this is Burgundy, and don't forget it. and I never have. And I got interested in Burgundy after that, and particularly I started off with sort of white Burgundy, Chardonnays and things. And then I was living in London in Marylebone, and there was a couple of very good wine shops nearby, and I would go in and say, all right, I've tried this. What about this one? And they were pointing me in different directions with Burgundies. I sort of learnt about Pinot Noir, and I became slightly obsessive about it, and obsessed by Burgundy. And then, cut to 10 years later, or 14 years later, something like that, I realized that where I live now, because I built a house in central Otago, where I lived, people were starting to grow really interesting Pinot Noir, producing really, really very promising wine, particularly the Millses over at Ripon. And I thought, well, if they can do it, why don't I'd like to do that. So when the opportunity came up, we planted 5 acres of Pinot Noir in the Gippsland Valley. The rest is sort of history. So it's 30 years now that I've been growing and producing my own Pinot, Two Paddocks.
That's amazing. Well, Sam, I think we should let you go. I know you're acting down there. Are you the bad guy in this crime movie?
No, I'm just the guy that loves the sound of his own voice.
The barrister. The barrister.
Yeah.
So I'll just flash this on the screen again. This is thank you very much for talking to us, Sam. Sam Neill, actor extraordinaire, winemaker, Two Paddocks, Central Otago. Thank you very much, Sam, for your time today. It's been great chatting.
Oh boy, it's great to see you again.
Cheers.